suspect in the Gilgo Beach murders appeared in court, or is appearing in court today. It's just a status conference for Rex Heuermann. He's accused, of course, of 3 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of 3 women more than a decade ago. He's pled not guilty through his attorney. This hearing comes as his family is making an odd request, some might think, is to have investigators return some of the items that were taken from their home. Joining us now, Court TV crime and justice correspondent Matt Johnson, who's been covering this case since it broke. We'll get to the family requests in a bit, but first, what is the latest in this case? Where are we?
So I believe it just wrapped up. This was just a status hearing, if you will, and there has been some reporting out of the courtroom of, once again, Rex Heuermann, like when I was in court covering it for Court TV, looked out at the gallery, stared at the reporters, and then walked out. All right, suspected Long Island serial killer Rex Heuermann back in court today for this pretrial conference. We could learn a little bit later of what he's going to do with all the guns, what the court is going to do. Heuermann's estranged wife, Asa Ellerup, is asking for those guns to be returned to her. Between 200 and 300 guns were seized during a search of their Long Island home over the summer. Heuermann was arrested and charged for the murders of 3 women in July: Megan Waterman, Melissa Bartholomew, Amber Costello, and remains the prime suspect in the death of Maureen Brainerd Barnes. All 4 victims were sex workers who disappeared after meeting a client. Their bodies discovered near Gilgo Beach, wrapped in burlap. Some were wrapped with tape and also belts, Ted. And I think that that's what we're waiting for the most in this case. Is they say that they have some evidence that they are testing for this 4th victim. When, if, will he get charged?
Right, and so these guns, I mean, it's a massive amount of guns. Obviously, they have some monetary value. Being the guns of a serial killer might actually boost that value. What's the ask here from the family?
The ask is coming from Asa Ellerup. So she's the estranged wife filing for divorce. She's asking for the guns to be returned to her. Ellerup's attorney says that the guns hold no forensic value, according to them. She and her 2 kids were cleared early on by police after her husband's arrest. Ellerup is fighting cancer and has no health insurance currently right now, according to her attorney. So she wants those guns back. They're worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. Of course, she wants to sell them.
At this point in time, this is all overwhelming to her. Her whole life has been put into upheaval, as of her children's. Her husband is sitting in jail, accused of being, a serial killer. So she's sorting out her own emotions, taking care of her children, before even addressing whether or not these allegations are true. We'll get to that at another point in time when she starts sorting out her own emotions. She needs to survive right now.
She's having a hard time from what I'm hearing, also from other sources that I have. I met her in the front yard there. She's also asking for cash, clothing, and jewelry that were taken from the home during the police search. They were there over a week. The guns, she says, first need to be released to the proper county, Suffolk County, and she's hoping for them. She says that you don't even have to return them to me or my attorney. You could, of course, return them to a gun dealer. I mean, the optics of all of this, having guns returned to the family of a serial killer, they're trying to avoid any pushback with that, but it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I
mean, you have to feel for her. I mean, can you imagine? One day, your husband, whoever, whatever their relationship was, he goes to work, and next thing you know, you find out he's a serial killer?
Right, and your connection to it all, of course, you lived with him, and he was living a double life. If he gets accused of what he's accused of, the worst, right? But also, it was some of the forensic genealogy, her DNA, her hair on some of those victims, from what we're hearing.
Yeah, and she's been cleared, like you said, and now is truly a victim as well. And you got to feel for her. If she needs the cash, she needs the cash. I understand, but it is a little dicey. We'll have to see how it is handled by the court. Matt Johnson, thank you as always. Let's bring in criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Franz Boacott in Baton Rouge. Franz, should she get her guns back while her hubby, who's accused of these horrible crimes, goes through this long, arduous process?
Well, nobody might like what I'm about to say, but here's the deal. If it's not evidence, the government can't seize property without some kind of legal justification, right? So I got to tell you, Ted, I think the guns go back if they're not evidence, right? And let's not mince words, she has every intention of selling these guns, probably to survive, right? Will the guns fetch a value because he may be a serial killer? Absolutely. But this is a little different than if he were to write a book about, you know, his exploits and profit off of his crimes. That would be different than what we have here. She can sell property that is either community property, her property, or his property, and there's not a lot any of us can do about it. So I think she gets the guns back as long as they don't have an evidentiary value to them.
But could you argue, if you're the state, well, we don't know. Like, we don't know if they're evidence yet, because first of all, we're still trying to hook him to that fourth victim who we believe he's responsible for her death. Maybe there is a connection of a gun being used. Now, which one of the 300, who knows? There could be a roadblock here put up by the prosecution.
Well, so here's the deal. You should be able to figure out if one of the guns was used on a victim, what caliber was used, right? So you could exclude the firearms that aren't of that caliber. The judge could then say, you know what? You're absolutely right, state. We're going to give you some time to figure this out, but we have to have a deadline at some point, because you don't get to seize the property indefinitely, right? Now, a lot of times this plays itself out in most states with, at the end of the case, you get the firearms back, okay? But in this instance, if they are not tied to a crime, there's really no reason not to give them back to her. I know it doesn't feel right. I know it kind of feels a little icky, but that seems to be what the law is, and that seems to be what the Constitution says.
The case itself against Heuermann, the fourth, they're waiting on some testing and maybe some, who knows what else, probably trying to break him as well as he's in custody, to get the fourth, enough for charges against the fourth victim. Let's say they can't get to a comfortable spot with Maureen Barnes. They would just go ahead with the three, and there's no time limit. I mean, at some point down the road, they can always add Maureen if they're now comfortable. Why hold up the trial now, unless I guess they feel like they're very close, so they just need some tests back?
So fortunately or unfortunately, I've previously represented a serial killer in Louisiana before, and I'll tell you what normally happens is they will prosecute the strongest cases. They will use the weaker case as other crimes evidence in the stronger cases. And then once they get a conviction on the stronger cases, they can make a decision based on the victim's family's input of, well, what are we going to do with this? You know, if he's already doing a life sentence, or if he has worse, are we gonna use the resources to try the fourth case if the victim's family is satisfied that he's not going anywhere and he's going to either be incarcerated for the rest of his life or worse? And
family input is important. These are cases that were unsolved for so long, and the relief, I'm sure, from those families that now there is an answer and a relief to everybody in that Long Island area. That will possibly dictate where it goes, correct? To your point, how involved were the families of the serial killer you represented to what extent were they involved in Louisiana? So
what I observed, and again, my victims in my case were high risk, which meant, you know, sex trafficking victims, drug using victims. What I observed is we had some of the victims' family was very active, and some never showed up, right? A good prosecutor is having all these conversations behind the scenes right now, and probably has already had these conversations, Ted, to know what the landscape of what she or he is dealing with. Rest assured, though, that both from an optics standpoint and a justice standpoint, the prosecutors are going to do everything they can to get justice for that fourth one, let alone the other three. It just is going to be a strategic move. And I'm going to remind the viewers that just because you don't try the fourth victim doesn't mean you can't backdoor that evidence in as what we call other crimes evidence. And we've seen this before in other cases where it's not this case, but it's evidence in another case that shows certain things that would prove this case, if that makes sense.
Yeah. We have an update from the court, too, and as Matt reported, it just finished up there in New York. The judge actually asked Heuermann a question. The question was whether or not he was able to review evidence in his cell, and he said yes, he'd been averaging 2 to 3 hours a day, I guess, of reviewing, and that was really the only time that he spoke today. He did stand up, apparently, throughout this entire hearing. Prosecutors gave Heuermann's legal team over 10 terabytes of information to review. And when he left the courtroom, apparently he did turn and look out into the gallery and may have had a small smile on his face, according to some people there in the courtroom. So that was the latest of what's happened there.